Oh, that's fine. It's usually happens with technology.
Perfect. Once again, Professor Antonio Davila, thank you so much for your kind acceptance to participate in our event. I will just do a brief introduction in Portuguese, and I will ask Professor Anderson Braga to stay with you during this presentation, and he will be your moderator.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Okay.
Então, muito boa tarde. Nós gostaríamos de agradecer pela participação de todo mundo. Gostaríamos de agradecer o apoio dos nossos patrocinadores, Concefaz, Grupo Gen Atlas, CFC, PwC, Traders Club, CIMA, CAPS, FIPECA, FIUSP. And hereafter we will talk in English. Professor Anderson Braga, please come to here. Professor Anderson will formally introduce you, Professor Davila.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. So I'd like to thank you, Professor Davila, for accepting our invitation to participate in our conference, our annual conference. Okay. I will briefly introduce Professor Davila. So Professor Davila is Professor of Entrepreneurship and Accounting and Control, and holder of the seat chair of innovation at IES Business School, University of Navarra. He was part of the faculty at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business, where he still teaches periodically and has also been visiting professor at Harvard Business School, where he earned his doctorate. His teaching and research interests focus on the growth of startups, innovation management, sports management, and management control. He has granted several prizes and awards, including the Management Account section of the American Account Association Best Dissertation Runner-Up Award, 1999. Professor Davila has co-authored several books, including Performance Measurement and Management Control Systems to Implement Strategy. He has also contributed several book chapters and published various research articles in academic journals, including the Account Review, Academy of Management Journal, Account Organizations and Societies, Journal of Account and Economics, Research Policy, California Management Review, and Harvard Business Review. And he is a prolific author of cases and a member of the editorial boards of the Journal of Management Account Research, European Account Journal, the Account Review, Management Account Research, and Sports Business Management. So I tried to be brief, but it's not possible. So thanks very much, Professor Davila, for joining us, and feel free to continue.
Okay, thank you very much. It just means that I'm getting old, so that's why it takes a little bit longer to go through the CV, but that's part of life. So thank you very much for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here, even if it's remotely. So they've asked me to talk a little bit about the work that I'm doing currently and what we describe as management, accounting, and management control is changing, and I think it's a discipline part of management. So it's facing a lot of changes over the next few years. In the same way, the companies are changing, the world is changing, and management in general is changing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a presentation, and so somebody says that I'm muted. Can you hear me? At least in the chat, it says Vinicius has said that she cannot hear me.
Yeah, we can.
Can you hear me?
Here, I think
okay.
This is a translation issue. I assume no, it's okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's everything okay. It seems
Okay, because there is okay. Good. So if things are fine, then let me proceed. So what I was going to do is share a presentation that I prepared for this talk. And by the way, if you have, oh, it says that you cannot hear me again. If okay. Anyway, I'll keep on going, and if there's a problem with the audio, just let me know. What I wanted to say is, if there is any questions to the presentation or any comments, just feel free to interrupt. Don't wait until the end. It's feel free if you want to speak about something or say something. Okay. Okay. So let me go here. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about is describe it as management control and what we call challenges and opportunities, and how things are going to change. Let me get my chat here so I can see if there's any question on the chat. And so the first message that I wanted to talk about is how the world is changing, and it's just amazing how the kind of the dynamics that we're seeing. So this slide shows the market capitalization, the largest firms in terms of market cap back in 2007, and how that list looked 10 years later. And if you look at both of them, there is only Microsoft that is common to both lists. In just 10 years, 5 out of 6 of the top companies in the world have changed. So it just shows the dynamics of that we're living. And the other interesting thing here is that before you would have energy companies like PetroChina, ExxonMobil, and China. Banks like Bank of China. If you look at the new list, is almost all dominated by technology. You have Apple, you have Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. There is only Berkshire Hathaway that it's there. And this is a graph that I got it from CB Insights, and just shows what is the expected lifetime of a company in the S&P 500. If you go back to the late 1950s, it was almost 60 years. If you move forward to these days, it's about 10 to 15 years. So you can see that the lifespan of companies has become much smaller over time. You can see the cycles of the economy, but in general, what you see is that the strategies is harder and harder to maintain stable, just because of the dynamics of the markets and the environment. Another one that's from Singularity University, you can see the time to reach 50 million users. For the telephone, it was 75 years. For Pokemon Go, it was 0.03 years. So that's a few weeks. Things are moving a lot faster. Things are being developed, adopted, and the population in general is much more open to change than it used to be. The other interesting thing is the rise of what we call the China, India, Southeast Asia. And the important thing is that over the last 30 years, there's been a huge development in that part of the world. And as it says in this slide, if you circle those, it means that given the development that they have gone through over the last 20 to 30 years, there is a lot of things happening in there. Actually, if you think in terms of population, those people have joined the market economy, and that means that there is at least twice the amount of people waking up every morning and thinking about how to develop a new business or create a new company. So that has also added to the dynamics that we've seen in the previous slides. I'm going to go through here a little bit faster. The idea of this slide is how these different technologies have dropped in time. The first one, 3D printing, a special type of 3D printing. It has dropped from 5,000 to 15 in the span of just 6 years. That's a drop of 100 If you look at space now, it's very kind of in the news because there's lots of private companies that are thinking about how to put people on Earth and space tourism. But the costs have dropped from $35,000 per kilo in 81. In 20 years, it has dropped almost 100 times also. Drones, especially in the construction industry, in 10 years have also dropped about almost 100. Solar has dropped also significantly. DNA sequencing, it was first done in 2001. It's dropped to $1,000 in 2019. IoT sensors, same thing. So what does that mean? The combination of those Asia joining the market economy has doubled the amount of people thinking about how to create new businesses, and technologies are advancing very, very fast. Each one of them offers lots of opportunities. So when you think about 3D printing, a drop of 100 in the cost of printing offers you a lot of new opportunities that otherwise wouldn't be there. But the interesting thing is that those technologies combine with each other. So you can combine 3D printing maybe with drone, or you can combine 3D printing with sensors. And the amount of opportunities that you have out there is just amazing. We are in a world full of opportunities. And of course, that's creating a lot of tensions socially, politically, but also in the business world. And you see a lot of changes going on. The combination of those two forces, the population and technology, what we have is dynamic and complex environments. So we are facing a world that is very different from the one we have faced for the last 100 years since management became a discipline. And now we have environments that are very complex, they are very dynamic, and I would say that the complexity in management has moved from the inside of the organization to the outside. If we look back 100 years, 20th century, the complexity of management was inside of the company. It was about how to design processes, how to motivate people, how to understand the customers. Now, the complexity of management has moved outside, and what we have is it's very dynamic and very complex environments that, of course, it's a risk for those people that of the stability of the bank. about a social network today, we think by social media spaces, but Facebook just destroyed my space. So what was, of course, there's always a lot of reasons why a company would suffer this kind of thing, but one of the reasons was that my space had so my big paradox is that the markets and societies, and we can see it almost in every aspect. So I'm focusing mostly on markets and companies, but you can also see they are becoming a lot more dynamic. Things change quickly. Yet the management that we know, they are designed for efficiency rather than they are designed to optimize the process of whatever the company is doing. Why? Because for 100 years, the environments were pretty stable. Societies were stable. Of course, there was crisis, there were political crises, there were economic crises, there were cycles. But the big foundations, which is the business models and the technologies, were pretty stable. So that has changed, as I've discussed before. And but our organizations are designed to respond to stable environments and focus on the inside, on process and efficiency. So this is the paradox itself. So what we used to have is that the complexity inside of the organization was much higher than the complexity in the environment. We could deal with the complexity in the environment, doing once a year in the strategic planning process a SWOT analysis or a pest analysis or of Borders 5 forces, and that was it. The rest of the year, we could focus on the complexity in the organization. We could focus on processes, on quality, on efficiency, on productivity. And the outside was kind of dealt once a year because it was pretty stable. So that situation led to an interesting setting where we have very, very sophisticated operational management systems, but we do not have sophisticated external management systems. So the reality now is that we have an environment which is a lot more complex, but we haven't changed the sophistication of our management systems. We still have a very sophisticated internal management system, but very, very weak external management systems. So this is where I think there's going to be the big change going forward. I think it's here from a management perspective, that's going to be the big opportunity for research, but also big opportunities for those companies that want to make a difference and want to win. It's their ability to manage all this complexity that it's outside. You can look at it from the perspective of innovation. You can look at it from the perspective of entrepreneurship. You can look at it from the perspective of agile strategies. But the important thing is that there's going to be a lot of work that's going to happen in here. There's going to be a lot of work to try to adapt organizations to understand the environment, take advantage of opportunities, scale those opportunities quickly, and be ready to execute on them. So what we have is, hold on. Oops. What we have is organizations that have become excellent at execution. So I'm not saying that execution is not important. I think it's going to be a necessary condition for success, but it's not going to be sufficient. It used to be the case that execution was necessary and sufficient. Going forward, it's going to be necessary, but it's not going to be sufficient. There's going to be companies that are very good at execution, but they're going to execute into a brick wall, like it happened with Kodak or it happened with Nokia as known examples. So execution, we have a lot of knowledge there. It's very, very important, but it's not going to make a difference. You need to be very good at this, but just to compete. But if you want to win, you need something else. So what's going to be the next battle? The next battle, as we talk about perceptual acuity before, when I mentioned Ramcharan, the next battle is going to be excellent at seeing change before anyone else does. So this idea of perceptual acuity. How can you see opportunities before anyone else sees those opportunities, so you can start building on those opportunities. So as it says here, we tend to overestimate how much we can do in 1 year, but we tend to underestimate what can be done in 10 years. Things seems, if you take a 1 year perspective, which is what happens usually in strategic planning, usually you just do an incremental change because, from 1 year to the next, things do not seem to change as much. But if you take a perspective of 10 years, it's just amazing how the world changes. So it's very, very important from a management perspective that we start to understand, to develop management systems that allow us to see this change, so the company can be ready to direct its attention to the outside and take advantage of those opportunities that, of course, then it will execute using the traditional management knowledge. objective is to change culture. So as we know, culture, it dominates how people behave in organizations. And we need to create a culture. Now, all the cultures that we have in organizations are what we call inward-looking cultures. They focus on the inside. They only focus about management and of the inside, processes, efficiency, productivity, quality. What we need to go is a culture that is equally balanced between the inside and the outside, a culture that takes care of that execution and all that part that we talked about, and we've been working for 100 years, but we need to have cultures that are sensitive to the outside, sensitive to what's going on in the outside world, to those changes, to those dynamics, to those business models, to those technologies, because that's where the company is going to win or die. So that's what we call open cultures, where you have as much of a focus on the inside as you have on the outside. Now, how do you create those cultures? And it's always interesting to think about cultures. And from my perspective, the only way you can change a culture is through habits. You have to change the habits of people. And the habits come from executing processes repeatedly. So you have to repeat the same process again and again until you create a new habit. So if you want to create a culture that pays attention to the outside, what you have to have are processes that focus the attention of people on the outside. And any process has to be supported by what we call management systems or information systems. So management systems that have a certain type of information. So if you want open cultures with processes that focus the attention of people to the outside, you have to have external information. You have to have people that are collecting and receiving information of what's going on in markets and societies. So management control becomes very, very important because it's at the basis of all this transformation. If you don't have external information, it's going to be almost impossible to create those open cultures that will allow to discover and create new opportunities for businesses. So we have those what we call external control systems that focus on the outside. It's made of systems, that's the information and processes that guide the attention of people. They're designed to capture and interpret those changes in the environment. And from that, you can have what we call agile strategies that are constantly adapting to a moving market. There are tactical decisions in there. And then, of course, there is the whole thing on innovation. So what are those external management systems? External management systems are systems to sense and interpret the forces around the organization. So those are systems that take information from the outside and bring it into the company. So the company and the people in the company can move their attention to the outside. So how does those systems work? So those systems, they are a lot of on innovation methodology, divergence. But the idea is, first of all, to proactively observe and experiment. So we need to create management control systems that forces people to observe what's outside. The basis of any discovery is observation. If there's no observation, there is almost no chance of discovery. If you think about it, innovation always starts outside, never starts inside of the organization. The opportunities emerge in the outside, and it's for us to discover those opportunities. So if you want to discover those opportunities, the first thing is to observe, experiment, interact with the real world. Of course, by the way we observe when we think about external control systems is we say every single person in the organization is a sensor, in the same way that we have IoT, Internet of Things, where we have lots of sensors across the world, across the city, to understand how the city is moving, to understand how the environment of an organization, we have people. And people observe, they interact, with clients, with trade shows, with the web, they read, they watch, whatever. So every person is a sensor. What we need to understand is the first step to discover opportunities is to have lots of observations. And those observations are decentralized. It's like crowd sourcing. Every person in the organization has the potential to bring some interesting observation. So we need to bring those observations together. And then, of course, there's going to be a lot of noise, and there's going to be a lot of things that don't seem to be relevant. Then it's a matter of finding the gems among the data. But that's not different from accounting. If you think about accounting, it's we have every single transaction is a data point, but nobody goes transaction by transaction. What you end up doing is looking at the financial statements, which summarize those transactions. When you think about external control systems, you're going to have a lot of observations, but somehow you need to summarize those observations. So the first stage is observe, people being exposed to those observations from almost everyone in the company. There's lots of exposure to observations. From those observations, then there is this stage of convergence. So the observation is the divergence, which is used a lot in design thinking. Then you have the convergence that happens when you synthesize those observations. So what we have here, it's we call it the landscape monitor. And what we do here to structure the information is, first of all, we map the landscape. It means you map you have the processes, the same way that we map processes inside the organizations. Here, we make a map of the outside of the organization. We rely on the observations of the sensors, of the people of the organizations. We also take advantage of information outside of the company. And then what we do is we generate insights. So people exposed to all those observations, what they do is they find those gems in the data. Then there's meetings, what we call the futures meetings, where those insights are evaluated and they lead to a new strategy, a new tactic, or a new innovation opportunity. So that's kind of the external management control system, how it works. Now that's more of a structure of the technology itself. So you have the observations database, you have personal observations, you have external observations. Those are feeding the observation database, and then you end up with what we call insights, which summarize how the world has changed over the last month for the organization. So what kind of research are we working on these days? So we have various types of aspects here. One of them is what type of external controls are organizations using at this point. And what we see is that a lot of them are still kind of hooked into the past with static framework like SWOTs and PEST and 5 forces. We are working with several companies implementing this new way to think about management. So this external management control, and companies are very happy with the way in which they're evolving. We are also using machine learning algorithms to try to improve the management of this data and then teaching material. Now, if you think about how the world is changing, and I am kind of getting to the end of what we experience is something that Joseph Schumpeter said almost it's now 70 years ago, and he said the problem that is usually being visualized is how capitalism in today's word would be how markets. So he said the problem that is usually being visualized is how markets administer existing structures, whereas the relevant problem is how it creates and destroys them. So for 100 years, management has been about administering existing structures. We are entering in the second part of this quote, which is, it's not going to be anymore about administration. It's not going to be anymore about just execution and efficiency, but it's going to be about how do we spot opportunities and create value around those opportunities. So here we have a manifesto on how things are going to change. But just as a conclusion, execution is not, we know a lot of execution. Management knowledge is 95% execution. That's what you get taught in any management program. It's not going to be enough. It's a necessary but not sufficient condition. Opportunities are outside, and just because we are facing markets that are very dynamic with lots of people innovating, with lots of technologies offering new opportunities. So it's crucial to understand the dynamics of the outside. Rely on the talent that you so carefully hire. It's understanding the environment is not going to be easy for just a few people at the top of the organization. You need all the talent that you can leverage, and those are the people that you have in your organization. Don't just have them work on execution, but involve them in discovery, in observing, in identifying those opportunities, those trends, those risks that are emerging in the environment almost constantly. Make looking outside part of your competitive advantage. The competitive advantage is not going to be an execution anymore. Competitive advantage is going to be on this perceptual acuity, in this ability to see change before anyone else does, have different experiments out there, different partnerships, different kind of bets to understand how the world is changing and how can you take advantage of it. And then, of course, as in any discovery process, there is luck. But as Pasteur said 100 years ago, luck favors those that see change before anyone else. He said that luck favors the prepared mind. Now luck favors those who see change before anyone else does. Okay, and so that was my talk, and I'm open for questions. So let me stop sharing, and if you have any questions, you can either ask directly or I also have the chat open. So go ahead. So management knowledge is going to change dramatically. It's the people that are going to get more visibility in organizations and companies are those that are more connected to the outside, those that are able to use all this information, that are involved in understanding opportunities, trends. So the education is going to have to change, because it's not going to be just about if you want to be relevant in an organization going forward, you will have to be good at something inside of the organization. So whether it's quality or productivity, but if you want to be relevant, you're going to have to be very much involved in understanding how the world is changing. So in a sense, organizations are going to put into our students or into managers more work, because you're going to have to be good at what you're already doing, which is the inside, but they're going to put also demands on you to contribute to invent the company of the future. And some people, they like the routine, they like to do the same thing again and again. Those people were somewhat successful in the old order. They're going to be marginalized in the new order. They're not going to be involved in what's going on in the organization. So we're going to need to educate first of all, we're going to have to develop good material, good knowledge about how to do this, how to understand the world, how to understand markets, how to understand opportunities, how to understand the dynamics of the ecosystem compete. But in addition, we're going to have to teach this and have people that come out of our universities with the knowledge. So Ivan has a question on the chat. He says, how do you see the academic curriculum evolving at the business schools to prepare professionals for this necessity to look outside company borders? Well, what you're starting to see is you're starting to see business schools, I wouldn't say struggling, but to some extent they struggle. But they're putting a lot more emphasis on entrepreneurship. Almost any company at this point, almost any business school at this point has entrepreneurship as one of its main pillars. And entrepreneurship is its discovery, its opportunities, is new businesses, new business models. So almost any business school at this point puts a lot of emphasis on entrepreneurship. They are putting a lot of emphasis also on innovation. So if you go to almost any executive education program that companies demand to business schools, it's going to be leadership, which is a traditional one, and it's going to be innovation. Those are going to be the two dominant aspects of any program that companies are asking for. And then you have the third pillar, which is sustainability. Sustainability is becoming more and more important. And again, it's going to be very much relying on external forces. So sustainability is a very dynamic field with lots of movements, lots of changes, and you have to be very, very open to these technologies and to those business models if you want to bring sustainability into organizations. So from a business school perspective, what you see is a lot more emphasis on entrepreneurship, a lot more emphasis on innovation, a lot more emphasis on sustainability. Everything is kind of looking outside. But of course, I mean, as I said at the beginning, I said they were more struggling. There's a lot of knowledge to be developed. Let's put it this way. So it's not obvious. It's not like if you ask somebody to teach management accounting, the curriculum has been there for 60 years. If you ask somebody to teach how to spot opportunities, there's not much to be taught. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So on the first question, a lot of the traditional management control systems that Ken Merchant and Wim van der Stede are talking about, those are control systems for execution. They, as I said during the presentation, they are very important because execution is going to be still important, but it's not going to be sufficient anymore. It's necessary, so you have to understand it very well, but it's not going to be sufficient. So all those management control systems, they are very good for, let's say, the execution aspect of organizations. They don't work for discovery. The issue that they have is that if you look at traditional management control systems, and you can go back to Robert Anthony, the issue is you would have a strategy, then that strategy would be translated into a plan, and then control was about making sure that that plan was being executed. What you face these days with with environments becoming a lot more complex is that first of all, your strategy has to be agile. So you cannot have a strategy that stays the same throughout 1 year or 5 years. So you're going to have strategies that are a lot more agile. They keep on changing. So you have to quickly replan. You have to quickly adapt. The second thing that you have is that this idea of plan doesn't work when the environment is changing. You can have a plan to execute, and parts of the company would be stable enough that you can have a plan, but there's going to be parts of the organization where you're not going to be able to have a plan. So what you have there, it's a lot of experimentation, a lot of options, real options in this case, and that doesn't fit well into the traditional management, which is more about we have a strategy, we have a plan, and we control that the plan is being implemented. So in a sense, that mentality works for the execution side. Is not going to external controls, and for the need to be a lot more agile, a lot more dynamic, a lot more spotting opportunities, doing experiments, trying new things, learning, changing course, adapting, etc., etc. In terms of the other, so you mentioned scenario planning. I forgot what was the other one. Oh, risk management. So risk management, whenever, from my perspective, an opportunity becomes a risk when you don't take advantage of it. So, and I'm talking about external risk. So I'm not talking about internal risk that's a different type of animal. So the risk that somebody does something stupid inside the organization, that's more the traditional internal control mechanisms. But I'm talking more about strategic risk, and that's the risk that the market changes and you miss that change. If you have a good external control system, you will identify opportunities before they become risks. So those systems, they make you aware of what are the potential risks coming from the outside. And the interesting thing is that you have, as I said, it's observation is critical. You have to involve the entire organization, because everyone in the organization has some talent that they can use to understand the environment. So if you use the entire organization and you use that talent to observe and to synthesize those observations, then you're going to identify opportunities before they become risks. So they are very intimately associated, because an opportunity and a risk is the two sides of a coin. An opportunity, if you don't pay attention to it and you let it go, or you don't see it, then it might become a risk. And then scenario planning. Scenario planning, from my perspective, is a very good exercise to wake up people, to force people to think how the world can change. And scenario planning is good. I mean, it used to be traditional in strategic departments to do scenario planning, and they would do 3, 4, 5 scenarios. I think it's a very good exercise as long as you don't believe it. So it's the world is complex enough that whatever scenario you build, it's going to become obsolete very quickly. And what used to happen with scenarios is that companies would believe that if they build 5 scenarios, one of them was going to be the actual future that was going to unfold for the company. Now the world is so complex that there might be, 50 or 100 different scenarios that can unfold. So it's impossible to plan all of them. So it's very good because it forces you to think about the future, to map the environment, to think about what are my sources. It forces you to think, how can I adapt and how can I keep my company flexible? Scenario planning can be very dangerous if somebody believes the scenario. So if you really believe that one of the scenarios that you have kind of created is going to be the real one, it's I think that the world is complex enough that that's not going to happen. The end scenario is going to be very, very different from whatever you've planned before. Yep. Yep. Well, I think not only controllers, I think managers in general, they are, especially in our countries, they are very, as I said, they are very used to execution. And if you're good at execution, you're gonna do well, and you don't have to worry about anything else. I think that is going to have to change, and controllers are in a very good position if they take the lead, because external stuff, external management control, external sensitivity to external opportunities, it's all about information. So when we think about external controls, we always start with mapping the environment, which is what controllers do when they control an internal process in an organization. You always process, and then you put the information, the measures on top of that process. So when we think about external control, it's very similar. Instead of mapping a process, you map an environment, an ecosystem of it. Then on top of this, you have to collect information. The big difference is that information for external control is going to be more qualitative than quantitative, because the early warning signals, they usually come in qualitative form and not quantitative form. So a little bit of a change that controllers will have to do is they will need to learn everything that has to do with textual analysis and algorithms that work with qualitative information and not just quantitative information. But once you make that transition, I think controllers they are in a very good position. But of course, they just need to make this mental transition. I think it's harder to make the cultural transition to make the knowledge transition. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And if anyone has any more questions, just send me an email. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.